Chapter 20. The Boundless Night. The ward had no clocks. Time, for Samantha, had shattered the night Ilara died, fragments scattered beyond recognition. Here, in this sterile purgatory, it was measured not in hours, but in the soft, rhythmic hum of the air conditioner overhead, a mechanical lullaby doing nothing to soothe. It was marked by the slow, deliberate beat of her own wounded heart, a fragile drum against the silence. It was counted in the unwavering, unblinking stare into the ceiling tiles, each one identical, a grid of endless, meaningless sameness. She hadn't spoken since they found her, not a syllable. Her throat, tight and constricted, felt as if it had swallowed the very air from Ilara's last breath. Her eyes, wide open and vacant, were like someone had carved her soul out and left the husk behind, leaving only an echo of the girl she once was. Her fingers, lying limp on the pristine white sheet, would twitch sometimes, a barely perceptible tremor, a ghost of a gesture. That was all. Outside, the world was deep in the night, the kind of night without stars, a suffocating velvet blanket draped over the city, the kind of night that didn't end, stretching on into an eternity of silent dread. It was the kind Samantha now carried inside her chest, a boundless, starless void. The room smelled of antiseptic and cheap lavender-scented soap, a futile attempt to mask the pervasive scent of fear and despair. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed, cold and sterile, casting long, distorted shadows across her hospital bed, making every corner seem deeper, darker. They said she was lucky. They said it like it was a blessing, a miracle. But Samantha knew luck was a fickle, cruel thing, leaving her behind when it took Ilara. Her father, a sentinel of silent agony, hadn't left the hallway since the ambulance arrived, a lifetime ago. They offered him a room, a place to rest, but he refused, his gaze fixed on her door, as if its hinges held the very fabric of his shattered world together. They brought him coffee, steaming and black, but he didn't touch it. Its warmth would have been a lie. The nurses whispered about him when they thought he couldn't hear, their voices hushed, sympathetic. He hasn't cried once. They didn't understand. Samantha did. He was beyond tears, just as she was beyond words. There was a point where grief became a stillness deeper than the ocean floor, a vast crushing weight that left no room for the easy outlet of weeping. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, a giant brought to his knees. He kept a photo in his pocket, worn at the edges, its surface blurred by countless touches. The nurses, in their quiet observations, caught glimpses of it. Two girls, younger, brighter, arms slung around each other, grins wide and unburdened. Back when smiles weren't impossible. Back when Ilara braided Samantha's hair with intricate skill, her fingers soft and quick. Back when her dad grilled burgers on Sundays, the smell of charcoal and sizzling meat filling the summer air, a promise of simple happiness. He hadn't looked at the photo in hours, perhaps days, but he held it anyway, his fingers clamped around it like a man clinging to the edge of a cliff, the last vestiges of a life he once knew. His knuckles were white, his fingers trembled, not from grief's weakness, but from something far more volatile, deep and low and volcanic, rage. He whispered Samantha's name sometimes when he thought no one could hear him. Samantha. Sometimes he said it like a prayer, a desperate plea to whatever cruel god watched over them. Sometimes like a question, searching for an answer that would never come. He didn't know what to do. He was supposed to protect her. He was supposed to protect both of them. Samantha heard the nurse's soft, measured footsteps before she saw her. Always the same one, a woman with kind eyes and a perpetual air of gentle concern. She always spoke softly, as if the silence of the ward, the silence within Samantha, might shatter if she wasn't careful. "Hi, sweetheart," she said today, her voice a balm, like she had the last 2 days, and the 3 before that. "I'm just going to check your vitals, okay?" She smelled faintly of mint gum and fabric softener, a comforting scent that felt alien in the stark hospital room. Her hands were warm, practiced, moving with an almost surgical precision. Samantha flinched when the nurse's fingers brushed her arm, to hook the blood pressure cuff. A small, involuntary recoil. That was the only time she moved, a twitch of protest from a body that refused to yield. The nurse didn't comment. She had learned after the first time. She didn't need to. Her eyes, kind but weary, saw the bruises on Samantha's wrists, the tightly wrapped bandages on her forearms. She saw more than she said, her silence a mirror to Samantha's own. "Do you want some water?" the nurse offered, holding out a clear plastic cup, condensation beading on its surface. Samantha never answered. Her tongue felt thick and heavy, a dead weight in her mouth. The nurse tried again, her voice a little softer, a little more hopeful. "I could read to you. Your dad brought a book, Ilara's favorite." And just like that, Samantha's body stiffened, a sudden, rigid contraction of every muscle. She hadn't heard Ilara's name out loud since then, since that night. The sound of it, spoken by another, felt like a sharp blade cutting her in half. Her throat tightened, a constriction so severe it robbed her of breath. Her fingers clenched into the blanket, digging into the soft material as if to anchor herself, to keep from dissolving. She wanted to scream, to unleash the pain and terror buried within her. But the scream was a solid thing, encased in cement, entombed deep within her chest. The nurse froze, her usual composure momentarily broken. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice a sudden flurry of apology. I shouldn't have." But it wasn't her fault, and Samantha knew this. She knew that everyone around her, these kind, gentle people, were trying to help, and none of them could. They hadn't felt the cold, gritty floor beneath their hands, hadn't crawled out of the blood. They hadn't heard Ilara's last ragged breath, a sound that would forever echo in the chambers of Samantha's memory. They hadn't heard Vargoth's voice, a low, predatory rumble that promised absolute annihilation. They hadn't seen what Vargoth did, the swift, brutal end to a life that had only just begun to bloom. They weren't in that house. They hadn't been trapped in the suffocating darkness, listening, waiting, knowing. Her father was sitting just beyond the glass observation window now, elbows on his knees, his broad back a monument of grief. His eyes were red-rimmed, but still dry. He hadn't touched the coffee. He kept staring, a silent vigil that never wavered. The nurse walked to him, her footsteps hushed, and spoke quietly, her voice a low murmur against the glass. "She's awake, but she's not here." The father nodded, a slow, heavy assent. He didn't reply, his throat too tight, too unused to speech. The nurse continued, her voice filled with a familiar mixture of helplessness and medical optimism. "I think she's in shock. We're doing everything we can, but—" He cut her off with a whisper, his voice rough, unused. "Is she eating?" "She drinks, a little, no solids." "I want to see her." "Of course." But she hesitated, her gaze flicking back towards Samantha's still form. "Don't expect anything." He breathed in deep, a ragged, shuddering gasp that seemed to carry the full weight of his pain. His fists were clenched so tightly they were white, the knuckles standing out like polished bone. He nodded once, a gesture of grim determination, then turned toward the door. When he entered the room, the sterile air shifted, charged with his presence. Samantha heard his boots first, heavy, slow, measured, like someone afraid they'd break her just by being near, that his sorrow might physically crush her. He sat in the chair beside her bed, and for a long while he said nothing. He just sat, a silent monolith of grief and regret. Samantha sensed him looking at her, his eyes tracing the contours of her face, searching for a sign, a flicker of recognition. She didn't turn her head. She didn't blink. Her gaze remained fixed on the ceiling tiles, the endless, unchanging pattern. Then finally, his voice, hoarse and low, a sound scraped from the depths of his being. "Sammy?" He swallowed hard, the sound audible in the profound stillness of the room. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." Samantha wanted to reach for him, wanted to scream and sob and crawl into his arms and tell him everything. What happened, what she saw, what she heard, to shatter the silence that had become her prison. But her mouth was sealed, not with tape, not with force, but with fear. A raw, visceral terror that made every muscle in her body lock down, freezing her in place. The name of the monster, Vargoth, was acid on her tongue, and even thinking it tasted like ash. Saying it aloud might turn her to dust. He laid a hand near hers on the blanket, not touching, just near. A silent offering of comfort, a tentative bridge across the chasm that separated them. "You don't have to talk," he whispered, his voice cracking, betraying the stoicism he had shown the nurses. I'll stay here all night if you want, all week, all month. I'll sleep right here if I have to." Her breath hitched, a small involuntary gasp. Her fingers, which had been clenched for so long, twitched again, a small, fragile tremor of acknowledgement. "I miss her too," he said. And the way his voice cracked then, truly shattered, it almost broke Samantha. The words, raw and unfiltered, pierced through the layers of her numbness. She felt the tears before she realized she was crying. Silent, hot streaks rolling down her temples and pooling in her ears, burning a path across her skin. He saw them. He always saw. "Oh, honey." He laid his hand over hers then, gently, his palm warm and steady. For the first time since that night, she did not flinch. The sterile hum of the hospital room was a constant, low thrum against the oppressive silence. Nurse Eleanor Vance stood in the doorway, a sentinel in the antechamber of profound grief. Her white scrubs offered a stark contrast to the shadows that clung to the corners of the room, as if trying to absorb the last vestiges of light. She didn't interrupt. She couldn't. The moment unfolding before her was too fragile, too sacred to be disturbed. Eleanor felt a corresponding sting in her own eyes, a familiar burn she'd learned to steel herself against, over years in the emergency and critical care units. But this was different. This was not the shock of a fresh wound, but the first sign of life stirring in a wound that had seemed utterly fatal. She retreated from the doorway, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone whose presence must never disturb the fragile ecosystem of healing. Her pen clicked, a small, sharp sound in the quiet corridor. She opened Samantha's chart. Subject, Samantha Rivers. Age, 13. Status, responsive, trauma-locked. Primary symptoms, catatonia, nonverbal, physical and psychological trauma consistent with long-term recovery. Eleanor paused, her gaze drifting back to the barely visible figure through the crack in the door. Responsive. Yes, to a touch, a paternal caress, a fragile thread of love. Trauma-locked. The words felt inadequate, hollow. It was more than locked. It was an entire world sealed off, a fortress built of fear, guarded by silence. She continued to write, her script neat and precise. Notes. She cried. First time since arrival. Responded to parental touch. Recommend maintaining current care plan. No mention of perpetrator. Presence looms, despite absence. The last line was unprofessional, a breach of protocol, but it was the truth. The perpetrator, the demon, the monster they officially referred to as an unidentified subject, his shadow stretched long and cold, even into the sterile confines of this hospital. Vargoth. Eleanor had seen the police reports. A dark, sleek hybrid of cruelty and cunning, with his remaining eye, the pale, chilling blue of glacial ice. He wasn't human, not in any recognizable sense. He was a force, an intelligence twisted into something utterly merciless, something that embodied fear itself. His absence from the room did not mean his absence from Samantha's mind, or the minds of everyone touched by this tragedy. He was a phantom limb of terror, an ache that would never fully go away. Eleanor closed the file, the soft thud a punctuation mark on the medical record. She stood for a moment, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on her. The endless nights, the whispered consultations, the collective despair masquerading as professional stoicism. Then She opened the file again. Her hand hovered, then moved. Below the official notes, in a space reserved for the most urgent updates, she wrote one last line, her pen pressing harder than necessary. That monster who did this didn't break her. He shattered her. But she's still here. The words were a quiet declaration, a vow whispered into the sterile air, a defiance hurled into the abyss of what had been done. Samantha was shattered. Yes. Pieces of her innocence, her trust, her very definition of safety, lay scattered and broken. But she was not gone. She was still here. A vital, fragile core remained, and that single tear was proof of its resilience. The boundless night passed slowly, not with the twinkling of stars, for the hospital's windows offered only a reflection of the fluorescent hallway, nor with the gentle caress of moonlight, but with breath, with silence, with a grief so profound, so deep, that it could not speak, could not articulate the fathomless chasm it occupied. Samantha lay in her bed, the tear trace now dry on her temple, a ghost of emotion. Her father had not moved. His hand remained in hers, a steadfast anchor. He watched her, his own eyes heavy-lidded, but unyielding. He had seen the tear. He hadn't reacted outwardly, hadn't made a sound, for fear of breaking the fragile spell, of scaring away the glimmer of his daughter, returned from a place he couldn't follow. But internally, his whole being had convulsed with a silent, desperate joy, a tiny flickering candle in the crushing darkness. He had learned to exist in this new reality, a world where the air was thick with unspoken horrors, where every shadow held a memory, and every sound seemed to echo with a past that could not be undone. He had learned the terrifying patience of grief, the slow, agonizing crawl of time, when all you could do was wait. Wait for a sign, any sign, that his daughter, the vibrant, laughing girl he remembered, was still somewhere within that silent, unresponsive shell. His thumb smoothed over her knuckles again, a repetitive, almost meditative motion. He felt the coldness of her skin, the tiny bones beneath. He thought of her laughter, her boundless energy, her quick wit. He thought of the way she used to tell him about her day at school, her voice animated, her eyes sparkling. All of it felt impossibly distant now, like a dream from another lifetime. The monster. The words seared through his mind, a brand of pure hatred. He knew nothing of Vargoth's true nature beyond the chilling reports, the aura of pure malevolence that emanated even from photographs. A predator, a hunter, a creature of cunning and relentless cruelty, who had chosen his daughter, his beautiful, innocent girl, and had stolen her peace, her joy, her very voice. He pictured the pale blue eye Eleanor had mentioned, cold and devoid of anything resembling humanity. He knew Vargoth was not a demon, not in the mythical sense. He was something far worse, a living, breathing embodiment of absolute evil, cloaked in a semblance of being. He was a testament to the fact that monsters walked among them, sometimes in forms too subtle, too intelligent, too human-like to be easily recognized until it was too late. The urge to scream, to rage, to tear apart the very walls of this hospital was a constant simmering heat beneath his skin, but he couldn't. He had to be here, present, for Samantha. He had to be her anchor, her safe harbor, the one constant in a world that had betrayed her so utterly. His grief was a suffocating blanket, but beneath it, a tiny ember of defiance glowed. The dark never truly left the room. It was not merely the absence of light, but the presence of a profound scar on the fabric of their lives. It clung to the corners, stretched across the ceiling, seeped into the very silence. It was the legacy of Vargoth, the monster whose deeds had permanently altered their universe. But neither did he, the father. He remained, his hand in Samantha's, his breath a quiet counterpoint to hers, his presence a silent, unyielding promise. He was not a savior, not a hero who could undo what was done. He was simply a father, holding on to the smallest fragment of hope, waiting for the dawn, knowing it would be a long, long time in coming. The journey would be arduous, fraught with unseen terrors and fresh wounds, but he would walk it with her. Shattered, yes, but not alone. Never alone.